Forgot to do breakfast? Well, brunch has got you. But what about those brunch recipes that we forgot completely? It's time the brunch movement brings back some of these iconic dishes no one makes anymore because from what I can tell, they seem irresistible. Savory crepes with chicken and mushrooms were definitely a classic for brunches at one time, but I doubt it's the kind of thing most people would go out for nowadays. Why is that? Well, in the history of the country, we've done lots of exploring. And let me tell you, some of that starts to get old. With a head full of inspiration and a kitchen full of ingredients, lots of home chefs would often just try to experiment with European cuisine. Mushrooms in particular used to be one of the most popular pairings for any kind of savory dish in the 20th century. Mushroom toppings, mushroom sauces, cream of mushroom soup, you name it, they were eating it. Crepes with chicken and mushrooms was seen as a pretty nice little brunch to have, a calm appetizer that wouldn't really fill you up too much. You'd save some room for dessert, grab a coffee, and that was your Saturday brunch. Nowadays, I think most people just opt for quick coffee runs or pastries. Crepes have turned into more of a side dish, considering the way trends have evolved. Egg sardu was supposed to be this unbeatable symphony of flavors. You had your poached eggs, creamed spinach, a lovely hollandaise sauce to add some aroma and atmosphere to the dish, topped off with artichoke hearts, served on a bed of the softest bread your money could get you with crab meat. As far as brunches go, this was the kind of thing that would immediately put you in the mood, and how could it not? Who doesn't get extra excited for whatever it is they're doing when it's this luxurious? I mean, isn't that the entire reason why people book limousines for proms? Egg sardu was a classic Creole dish that ran circles around the New Orleans crowd, but it couldn't last in the long haul. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, there's not enough going on in this dish to warrant keeping it in the mainstream for this long. The days of poached eggs as brunch options died out in the 80s, I think. Ham and Gruyere strata sounds really fancy, like the kind of thing that could easily run you $30 to $40 at any establishment worth their salt. But trust me, it's not all that gourmet. Taking it for what it is, ham and Gruyere strata can definitely take care of even the most rabid casserole cravings from the most die-hard fans of the dish. It's a layered casserole with ham, Gruyere cheese and eggs served with a layer of bread, and I think as far as the 60s were concerned, this is pretty much all you would see in most places. People were crazy for big brunches back then. The definition of what constituted a brunch menu was so wildly different in the 60s compared to now that generations from both eras may easily just say the other isn't having real brunch. Back then, it was all about being big. The bigger you were, the better, the more customers you'd get. For a long time, that's the memo restaurants ran with, but evolving tastes meant smaller plates, and not everyone could get by pigging out every time they started their car and went out on the town for a bite to eat. As a result, casseroles in general, not just this one, have faded out of people's go-to brunch options. We have loads of relics from the early ages of our history, and one of them was the recipe for salmon kedgeree. This British national treasure has a lot of its most prominent traits rooted in the Indian subcontinent, since it takes a lot of its most important flavors from their cuisine. It's usually made with haddock, and it's actually just easier to think of it as smoked fish than some tricky upscale European dish. Think lots of flaky, smoked fish with rice, boiled eggs, flavored with spices like cumin, coriander, and turmeric. It gives the rice a lot of muscle flavor-wise that it didn't have access to before, letting even a simple combination like this punch way above its weight and hold its own with most brunch menus. So interestingly enough, people actually used to squeeze lemon juice a lot on dishes like these. This isn't something people do much of anymore, but it was a pretty nice little garnish. Kedgeree was one of the first British heavy breakfasts, and it attracted lots of people in places like New England that already had an acquired taste for stuff like this. Our world's become so much more connected now, though, thanks to the internet, that it's a lot easier to see other dishes from other cultures, and over time, interest in British classics just declined. Plus, who hasn't smoked fish before? Deviled crab and grits, on the other hand, are definitely something you could place in a list of America's top 20. It was a coastal craze that dominated a lot of the 20th century brunching that went on, and there was just no beating it. So, I've noticed that the things that stick to being simple, easy, and delicious work the best in our country. There's, of course, a lot of room for experimentation. But I think so far out of everything I've mentioned, you're much more likely to just encounter crab and grits in the concrete wilds than sardu or kedgeree. It was back when crabs weren't so expensive either. Like, you could get this for a few dollars, which I know is really insane to hear about crab meat. Whether you blame the job market or inflation for that, crab just doesn't meet most people's brunch standards these days, especially if you're trying to make a weekly thing out of it that you want to sustain. The thing with these kinds of dishes is that they work best as an occasional fancy treat. If you do get crab, you'd probably want it to be something fancier than just crab and grits. Tricky pricing such as this is one of the reasons you don't see this dish too much in most brunch spots anymore. So, baked eggs in tomato cups had a more calm career throughout their tenure as a brunch option in America. People warmed up to this dish mostly because of the health crazes that were going around in the 80s and 90s. It was a period where every American was looking at their pantry, themselves and their family, and wondering how they could collectively start eating better. Public sentiment was pretty much geared against the bacon strip and all for the greens. If you were a veggie eater back then, you might know what I'm talking about. Baked eggs in tomato cups were seen as a really light and refreshing option to go for, and that was in line with the spirit of brunch for most people. People in more urban areas and suburban neighborhoods often considered brunch to be a light, casual meal. Not too heavy, not too light, and for a lot of people, baked eggs in tomato cups fit perfectly into that. Nowadays, the table has flipped a little. It's the dish that's probably the most eye-catching that'll get more traction at a restaurant, instead of something that's actually refreshing. You can't change your diet immediately, though. Health concerns are one thing, but you just can't make a big lifestyle change that quick. People tried to find middle grounds, and as a result, we got dishes like spinach and bacon souffle, which always contained really light and airy spinach with crispy strips of bacon and poached eggs. People thought that was healthy enough, and they tried to keep the oil for their bacon as clean as they could. You'd be going for things like vegetable oil or olive oil instead. The rise to popularity for something like spinach and bacon souffle really shows you the way America started opening itself to more and more ideas from other places. Before the 90s, all three core parts of this dish, the spinach, the bacon, and the souffle, would be very separate things, and no one would ever even think to combine them. On the other hand, spinach and bacon souffle was a hit combination when it did eventually come out. People thought there was real potential in the dish since it handled familiar and unfamiliar ground in a really balanced way. Turkey hash with sweet potatoes. Come on, do I really need to explain this one? I'm sure if you've ever had either hash or sweet potatoes, you know how good they are together. I mean, you have to see the vision, right? At least loads of people in the 90s did. Despite what you might think, though, it was actually around Thanksgiving when this dish would be the least popular. Think about it for a second. It's the holidays, you're out turkey shopping, you see turkey everywhere, you come home to it, and the next day, because you obviously spend so much money on that big fat turkey, you're not going to let it go to waste, right? You man up and eat those leftovers despite the incessant desire for literally anything else. It gets old. All other times of the year, though, this was one of the finest brunches you could have, and that too, on a budget. It meant that lots of people could start going out for more brunches because options were becoming accessible with their pricing. This sweet, savory hash was often topped with fried or poached eggs as well. So not only were you eating something undeniably delicious, but you were also eating pretty healthy. I'm being honest with you. Again, the time for smoked haddock is just gone now. You're not that likely to find it as a brunch option in most places in the United States of America, but you might find a few pockets of the country where it's still a well-respected option. Most of these places are coastal or coast-adjacent cities and urban hubs. I'm talking about places like New England, with an incredibly strong love for maritime cuisine. Places like that are also natural sources of haddock and smoking fish, or having it with chowder and poached eggs was a really common bench option. You can also just go northwest to Washington and Oregon, and you'll still find it. Basically, any place that has a strong, well-documented love of seafood, you're likely to find at least a few places that can smoke a haddock right and poach an egg properly. However, There used to be a time where you could go to literally any brunch joint and find this on the menu, and for a really reasonable price. Those days just aren't here anymore, and the biggest reason for that is that tastes have simply changed a lot from the times when people had to rely on catches of the day for their daily meals. Oyster stew is a really creamy dish that has a lot of deep roots in the culinary history of America. If you go on over to any of the coastal regions, even ones we haven't discussed so far, you'll find that one of their biggest traditions is toast points and oyster stew. If you're not too familiar, toast points are just triangular slices of bread that's been toasted and buttered. The star of the show here, the oyster, adds this really briny flavor to the dish and brings oceanic vibes into it. The cream and milk base here makes a really velvety stew that has a lot of richness to it, and the spices are simple, but they get the job done. Best not to fix a clock that isn't even close to broken, you know? What people would do with their brunches is have their toast brushed gently with butter or olive oil, and that would usually go super well with the oyster stew. Nowadays, stews have overall taken a back seat in the large majority of the country. It used to be you could find really good oyster stew in places like the Chesapeake Bay and New England. They had so many seafood shacks in Portland and Maine, even as far away as Massachusetts, but nowadays, it's just not profitable enough to warrant keeping. Ham and egg crepes with bechamel sauce are a French-inspired pairing that never really let anyone down. It's the kind of dish that makes you want to picture yourself relaxing in a villa by the beach. Most people probably think of diners when they hear ham, though, but thanks to the bechamel sauce here, it definitely goes to another level. The thin and delicate crepes are stuffed very precisely with lots of ham. On top of that, you get fluffy poached eggs that have been ever so gently seasoned. They can be creamy, but they're not supposed to really add a lot of show-stealing flavors to the dish. Think of this as more of a strong supporting character in the background. Nowadays, you can find a plate for like $15 or $25, but most of that price point really just comes from the bechamel sauce here. The issue with crepes is that they really require skill, and making a good bechamel sauce isn't exactly something a beginner chef can feel confident with either. Now, there's no shortage of skilled hands, but there is a fast-paced culture that just doesn't really appreciate time-consuming brunches anymore. Let's dial it back to the 60s real quick. If you wanted brunch and you wanted to do it right, there was pretty much only one thing to go for. Breakfast casserole with spinach and sausage had the power to pull an entire crowd, and that's what you get when you're versatile and affordable. Being budget-friendly helps a dish go a long way, and this one made it all the way to the tables of the customers' homes as well. The combination of several layers of sausages, cheese, spinach, and eggs, along with bread and potatoes, made the perfect combination. It was nutritional nirvana, brunch heaven, a paradise for your taste buds. The cheese was usually cheddar, Swiss, or feta, and that worked so well with the mild and savory flavor of the sausages. Nowadays, you can find this for around $18 or less, but back then, you could honestly just get this for single digits in terms of pricing. The flavor profile here wasn't that complex, nor were the ingredients, but it was something that could outdo the finest dining because of how comforting it was. Finnan haddie with cream sauce was another dish that involved smoked haddock, but this time it would be poached ever so softly in milk or cream and then served with a really velvety cream sauce. The dish was something that came into America thanks to Scottish immigrants doing what immigrants do best, bringing their homeland recipes here and enriching our cuisine. The smoked haddock was mildly smoky, but the cream sauce was really buttery and smooth. It would even have a dash of mustard or parsley as a small garnish. During the peak popularity of this dish, which was really just the start of the 20th century, it was pretty modest. The dish would cost you $1 or $2 at brunch back then, which now, well, translates to $12 or $25. Let's take a moment of silence for our wallets and future prospects. The decline in haddock was something that affected all kinds of haddock dishes, and it's something you see across the list too. Not one of these survived, and there weren't drastically different reasons as to why they didn't survive. Haddock just became so available that there was no point in keeping it as a brunch option. You want your brunch to feel a little special, you know? A soufflé omelet with herbs was definitely new as far as most Americans were concerned. It was this really airy dish that had a lot of elegance to it, as all soufflés tend to do, but it also had the simple nature of an omelet, which made it the perfect kind of thing for brunch. As a breakfast, of course it would work, but thanks to the soufflé element, it could also work as lunch. The whipped egg whites were also not your usual affair. This time around, the whipped whites would have to be folded into yolks and then cooked with a lot of attention to detail. You'd add a finish of herbs such as chives and tarragon, and the buttering would also help add this really appealing golden crust to the eggs. Back in the day, you'd honestly just get this for around 50 cents or $1.50, but now you would find it for more than $15 easily. Despite appearance, this is a tricky dish and it takes skill to make it work. The egg needs to be whipped perfectly. Any error in the folding means the dish doesn't hold, and the soufflé itself needs to be cooked by an experienced hand. That's a big part of why most restaurants don't keep complex items like this on their brunch menus anymore. So the thing with bread pudding with mushrooms and leeks was that it was a case of food experimentation discovering gold. I mean, seriously, this dish was a diamond in the rough, a gem we hadn't found, whatever shiny, luxurious rock you can think of as a synonym. This dish was it. Bread pudding with mushrooms and leeks was a brunch star, and it stayed that way for a long time during the 60s. It was this casserole with the texture of a custard, so immediately it was the new it girl on the block. What was this casserole so incredibly strange and different from what everyone was used to by now? The funniest part was that it was made using day-old bread, sautéed mushrooms, leeks, and just eggs and cream. There wasn't even anything that deep going on here. It achieved this texture thanks to the custard-like bread base on the inside. Plus, with such a perfect golden crust in the 60s, this was one of the best ways to spend $1. It wasn't even something you would really call rustic either, unlike its current perception, but unfortunately, the push towards lighter meals meant dishes like this just fell out of style. Eggs. Florentine was an offshoot of Eggs Benedict. This time, the ham was swapped for sautéed spinach, and this was supposed to be something that could help cater towards the vegetarian-friendly crowd that was popping up all across the country. It was going to be a toasted English muffin that had been paired with fresh spinach on top, a poached egg on the side, and a creamy hollandaise sauce as a base. The sauce was the metaphorical and literal glue of the dish. The butteriness of it helped make the spinach shine more, while the tanginess contrasted perfectly with the eggs. Plus, the sauce made the English muffin a bit of extra sweetness, so basically it was like a passive amplifier, or the building block of the dish. Again, you could get this for really cheap, like around $1.50, but nowadays it'd probably run you around 10 to 15. There are a lot more trendier options for vegans these days, like avocado toast. Stuffed zucchini boats were one of the nicest things to come out of the health movement that gained steam during the 80s and 90s. A super versatile dish that involved just as much skill as a soufflé omelet because of the wrong cut or movement meant that you'd mess up the entire look at best, and at worst you were making a leaky boat that couldn't hold the filling in. You had to cut the zucchini in two distinct halves, hollow them out evenly, and fill them with a mixture of savory ingredients like root vegetables, ground meat, different kinds of grains, and of course, it wouldn't be an American classic without cheese now, would it? All of that together gets baked until it's a tender, perfect golden, and is served with eggs and bacon. Now, some restaurants decided to differentiate themselves by adding the eggs and bacon along with the filling, and it was honestly a pretty good variation. Even back then, a zucchini boat would run you around $2, but now it would probably cost around $15. It faded thanks to how intensive it was from a labor perspective, and most brunch places just prefer easy dishes so they can better handle the influx of orders now. Rice pudding with cheese is a much lesser-known variant of the classic rice pudding. Now, I know you all might associate it with going to your grandma's or with some documentary you watched about how the Depression had dishes like these, but this one's a little far removed from both. I don't think most people's grandmas were working cheese into their rice puddings, but if yours was, please do share that tidbit of your life in the comments down below. The cheese also couldn't just be any old packet of cheddar you had lying around. It had to be ricotta or feta or parmesan. The spices were all warm ones like nutmeg and cardamom, and you could add raisins for an additional twist, but most people would leave it at just the warm spices. Now, the reason this faded is because it simply didn't work. There's always going to be a niche fan base for things like this, but you can't really expect it to gain mass appeal. It was seen as a pretty unusual and wacky combination, and a lot of people thought the cheese and rice made a really icky texture together, and I can't say I blame them. Baked polenta with cheese and mushrooms is a dish that's too rustic for the brunch tables of today, but that doesn't mean we can't revisit this delicious piece of history. This is a dish that shows that no matter how far trends go or how much they change, they'll never get rid of America's love of comfort food. The 90s was a century where mushrooms really started to pop off, and the earthy depth of them wasn't just something that people were liking anymore, it was something they really loved. A lot of people got used to eating mushrooms in one way or another during the Depression, so it makes sense why it became such a nationally acquired taste. In the middle of the 20th century, this dish hit its peak, and it was something that was deeply enjoyed by middle-class families at brunch options everywhere. Baked polenta was something that was exactly the kind of comfort food Americans liked. Warm, cheesy, fun to eat, and cheap. It's still a good brunch option in some places, but those are all Italian-dominant communities and Italian joints. When you think of eggs drum kilbo or hear the name, where do you think the dish comes from? It's just a little exercise I want you to do and share in the comments below. I'll give you a few seconds to guess. Okay? Got your bets? Well, you might be surprised, but this is actually something that comes right out of the lap of, and yes, cue my drum roll, British luxury. It's something that combines seafood, eggs, and a tomato-based dressing. In fact, this is so much of a hit there that its other name in the country is Queen Mother's favorite. By all accounts, this is a royal dish. Here, though, you wouldn't really see it being treated with the same level of grandiosity. The dish involved lobster or crab, served alongside creamy eggs and the dressing. You would make the dressing by combining mayonnaise, tomato paste, cream, and just a few spoons of Worcestershire sauce or Tabasco, and voila, your brunch was complete. It was, however, too expensive for most people in restaurants to warrant it. See, the thing with lobster dishes is, they really need to be cash cows if they're going to justify being put on any menu, and most brunch places don't see enough traction for them to warrant keeping them on the menu long term. Cheese blintzes are a really classic dish right out of the heat of Eastern Europe. It's actually something that most people associate with Jewish cuisine, and that's thanks to the way it features these really thin pancakes that would almost remind you of a crepe. The filling on the inside is a work of art too. It's creamy, and the sweet cheese mixture really adds a lot of complexity to the dish. You pan-fry these, well, pancakes until they're golden and ready to be served. Then you just top it off with whatever you like. But instead of honey and maple syrup, most traditional pairings were things like sour cream, powdered sugar, and fruit compote. The toppings were supposed to be bright so that the tanginess of the cheese filling would bounce off of it well. As a brunch option in Jewish communities, this was the pride and joy of many delis and diners. It was also stupidly cheap, coming in at around 20 to 50 cents. Nowadays, you see them on brunch menus and specialty bakeries, but not a whole lot. They're also a lot more expensive now, naturally. There's another reason they lost mainstream popularity too, and that was because you couldn't make crepes that were that thin and so delicate and not mess them up. Of course, this meant restaurants were losing ingredients, time, and potential orders, so they just started avoiding things like this. Potato rosti is a dish that comes right out of Switzerland and Swiss immigrants. It's something that is made from grated potatoes, which then are thoroughly pan-fried. The end result is pretty much something like cheese blintzes actually, except this time, your pancake is made out of potatoes and there are no cheese fillings. However, you might be wondering what exactly you're supposed to do at brunch with just a pancake. I mean, you might as well have stayed home or dipped into IHOP if all you were going to get was some pancakes, right? Don't worry, potato rosti usually came with smoked salmon, and oh boy, what a wonderful smoked salmon it was. Silky, delicately salty, and incredibly smoky in a way that would never overwhelm you. It gave the dish so much ambiance that it was missing. Most people thought of this as a pretty simple dish and served it with capers, a bit of lemon juice or creme fraiche, but it was also just good enough to eat on its own. Smoked salmon used to be one of the most popular things people would get for their brunch options, and it was hard to avoid it really, especially if your regular brunch spots were in upscale neighborhoods. Nowadays, dishes demand more luxury when it comes to salmon, so simple pairings like this don't really get much attention. Stuffed bell peppers with eggs and cheese are a combination you can never really escape if you take a visit to the South. Look, whether you go through the Great Plains, get a hotel and get real cozy up in Texas, or just wander through the Southern Expanse, it's simply impossible that you go anywhere in that area and not try these. Stuffed bell peppers are a regional hit as much as they are a national one. And I'm telling you, some of these fans really don't play about their bell peppers. It's usually stuffed with things like vegetable and ground meat mixes, but today we'll only be talking about the eggs and cheese variant. This would add a lot of calmness to the dish, as naturally biting full force into a bell pepper can be a situation at best, and an ordeal that you won't be getting through without a lot of milk at your side at worst. However, people who could handle the spice honestly thought this was one of the best dishes you could get in the American South. It was invigorating, fun, the perfect thing to get with your friends and capture some embarrassing pictures of them flopping a bite in the meanwhile. Maybe it's because spices bring the joy out of us, or maybe it's something more. But stuffed bell peppers have always been a go-to brunch for many people, even if they're not as popular as they used to be. Breakfast lasagna is a really creative spin on the traditional lasagna you get. Now, if you ask me, that's always been a dinner date kind of meal, but people tried to spin it around for that exact reason. People wanted variants of lasagna that were a bit more accessible at other times of the day and for other meals. Hasn't it happened to you where you order or get lasagna and it's left over, so you just reheat it the next morning? All in all, would you agree or disagree that this is a pretty delicious breakfast? I think I'm voting yes, and I know a lot of you will feel me on that. Layers of eggs, different kinds of meats like sausage, bacon, and ham, all typical breakfast meats, and cheeses like cheddar, mozzarella, feta, or ricotta, along with sauces such as a bechamel sauce and a cheese sauce or even maple syrup, meant that this dish had infinite variety. You could change the entire game up by just leaving out a single ingredient or adding a bit more of, let's say, the bechamel sauce. You could also get an entirely different lasagna depending on the base, which, honestly, is where most of the real magic happened. The bases could be waffles, hash browns, crescent roll dough, or even pancakes. As long as it was starchy, buttery, and could hold, it was base-worthy. Now, there were loads of variations of the breakfast lasagna. Some places did a breakfast ingredients-only version with typical stuff like eggs, sausage, and hash browns only. Some tried a sweet savory mix with pancakes, maple syrup, ricotta cheese, and more. It was really fun, and I'm honestly bummed that you don't get such an interactive dish for brunch anymore. So, broccoli and cheddar quiches are a pretty viable brunch option. You get everything you want out of it, you know? A flaky pastry crust adds the right amount of heaviness for the dish, whereas the custard filling of eggs and cream add the perfect amount of soft, thick richness that works so well as a contrast. Pair that up with broccoli and sharp cheddar cheese, and you have a brunch option that appeals to people who enjoy comfort food and die-hard vegetarians as well. I know you might be a bit disappointed that we aren't ending the list with a meat-heavy brunch, but you gotta have something for everyone, you know? Which is kind of what broccoli and cheddar quiche was, something for almost everyone. Well, everyone except meatheads, but hey, if you were ever looking to get into your greens more and incorporate some vegetation into your diet, this was the way to go. The modern equivalent of quiches today is something that doesn't really experiment a lot with different kinds of cheeses or crusts, but back then, you also had crustless options for people who were wanting to have an even lighter meal. There was also a meat option where you could add different kinds of meats. So yes, it did have something for everyone, though not every place had these options. It has a lot of vegetarian appeal, but I think most people just don't really feel like having broccoli when they head out for brunch, which is why it's not too popular. Ever wonder why corned beef hash became such a breakfast staple, especially during the bustling post-war era? It combined diced corned beef, potatoes, and spices, all canned for convenience. Typically served with eggs or toast, this meal option was a quick, hearty solution for families on the go. Promoted by brands like Hormel and Libby's, its marketing highlighted the ease of preparation and robust flavor, appealing to those with limited time for cooking. These advertising efforts often portrayed corned beef hash as the hero of the busy morning, saving time without sacrificing taste. The product maximized American values of efficiency and practicality, fitting perfectly into the fast-paced lifestyle of its consumers. It continued to be recognized for its convenience and satisfying taste. Maple bars are a type of donut that was first created in the mid-20th century. This sweet treat is typically enjoyed as a breakfast item or snack, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where it has become particularly popular. Maple bars are made from a light and airy dough that's shaped into a rectangular bar, then fried and topped with a sweet maple-flavored icing. The maple bar is believed to have originated in Portland, Oregon in the 1920s, with local donut shops offering this unique variation of the classic donut. The type of dough used for maple bars is similar to that of traditional donuts, ensuring a soft and tender texture. In 2013, the mayor of Portland declared June 7th as National Donut Day to celebrate the city's rich donut culture, including the iconic maple bar. Journey cakes, Johnny cakes, whatever ancient name you know them by, this is another example of Americans trying to keep the love of sausages alive by putting new spins on dishes. Sometimes they were new ones. Sometimes they were ones that already existed for a while. A lot of people were pretty familiar with Johnny cakes already, but the sausage version was something that was made by the people of North America. They started off with the indigenous communities over there, and ground corn was a big part of their daily routine. They started using ground corn to make these flatbreads, which were the basic breakfasts in North America. Eventually, farmers started getting their hands on a bit more pork than before, and thus sausages were brought into the mix. It's really a great lunch or breakfast, doesn't bloat you, doesn't leave you running close to empty still, and feels great while tasting delicious. People kind of debate where the name came from, though. There wasn't really a Johnny that made this dish popular, nor was there any kind of historic or iconic journey that it was popular with. I guess maybe you could call it an offshoot of Jonakin, which was a New England term that was used for cornmeal cakes and the like, but then again, it's not really the same. Either way, what we're concerned about is how it takes a sausage and makes it shine. It didn't start out this way, as in the North it was really just more corn than sausages. When it hit New England, it was a breakfast meal that would come with molasses or syrup. In the South, you'd instead have cornmeal pancakes, and over time, more and more breakfast items kept getting tacked onto the dish until we hit sausages. McDonald's is also something you usually associate with burgers, fries, and a pretty good shake just like Wendy's, but they would also try to rebrand a little with their McSkillet burrito. Originally something they launched in the November of 2007, it was a masterpiece that captivated people immediately and became one of the biggest parts of their sales, giving their breakfast menu just as much success, if not more, than anybody else's. When you think about a McSkillet, you should imagine one of those monster burritos from Chipotle. This was just as famous as those which were pretty much the king of the burrito game, but people would often begin alternating between the McSkillet or outright switching to it. We mean it really went well with some steak and roja sauce as add-ons. It is just that the McSkillet was not particularly a new concept, so when the initial hype died down, it got discontinued in 2013. Even now, there are still many online petitions to bring it back, so who knows? Eggs in a nest, also known as eggs in a frame, brought a playful twist to traditional breakfast eggs by frying them inside a hole cut from a slice of bread. This simple yet delightful dish allowed for creativity and personalization during preparation, making breakfast an engaging meal. It was particularly popular for its ease of preparation and the joy it brought to the breakfast table, allowing for variations such as different bread types or added toppings like cheese or herbs. The interactive cooking process, cutting the bread and watching the egg cook perfectly in the middle, was a key appeal, making it a favorite among families. This dish stood out for its simplicity and the fun it added to cooking, making it a go-to choice for a quick and enjoyable breakfast. German pancakes, also known as Dutch babies, are a unique breakfast dish that originated in the early 20th century. These pancakes are often topped with powdered sugar or fruit. The ingredients for German pancakes include eggs, flour, milk, and sugar, creating a batter that is poured into a hot skillet and baked in the oven. The key ingredient that gives German pancakes their distinct puffiness is eggs, which cause the batter to rise dramatically while baking. These pancakes are typically served with a squeeze of lemon and a dusting of powdered sugar, enhancing their delicate flavor. In the 1960s, Dutch babies gained popularity in California, thanks to Sunset magazine featuring the recipe in their publication. German pancakes are also commonly referred to as Dutch babies, a name popularized in the United States. I don't really know what the trend was, assuming that mothers as a collective were tied to these dishes, but Mama's cheese straws are another highlight of anyone's time in the South. Cheese straws themselves are something that have been around since the very earliest cocktail parties, but it's in the South where cheese is revered as the holy grail of dairy, where dishes like these first got a lot of steam. Do you think this is an appropriate dish for a wedding or a birthday? That's exactly where it would be served a lot of the time, though. Maybe that's surprising, but I don't exaggerate when I say this dish had crowd-pleasing power, and it had it in spades. The thing with these is that they actually are so popular because of how easy it is to get everything you need for them. I'm not playing with you when I say the hardest thing to get on the list is the cheddar cheese. The dish itself is these long, thin sticks that get baked and are served alongside snacks. Either way, whether you have this as a standalone dish or an appetizer, you're in for a pretty good time. Costing nothing but $1 and 3 minutes of your time as the service worker assembled it, Taco Bell's mini skillet bowls were an amazing breakfast and lunch that people adored picking up. Why was it so good for takeout especially, and not a meal you would typically sit down and have? Because it was super quick in all regards, the preparation and the consumption. A quick affair to get you all readied up on your way to work or school, and it was always a sunny plus side that it left you with enough lunch money for later. In the corporate world, you really need cash on hand at all times for those midday cravings, and that is a part of why fast food culture and restaurants got so popular in the first place. Since the famous old Bell decided to take down the mini skillet bowls from their already stellar menu, people have found quick substitutes and ways around it. Remember Quisp cereal? Launched by Quaker Oats in 1965, this cereal brought a whole new level of fun to the breakfast table with its alien mascot and saucer-shaped pieces. It quickly won over children with its sugary flavor and captivating animated commercials that made breakfast fun. The cereal's unique branding and playful design were key differentiators in a crowded market. Despite its initial success, the shift towards healthier breakfast options posed challenges for Quisp, leading to its eventual status as a nostalgic item brought back periodically to appeal to adults who had grown up with it. This strategic shift in marketing to tap into nostalgia, combined with occasional updates to its formula, allowed Quisp to maintain interest among former fans while navigating the complexities of modern cereal markets. The Fluffernutter sandwich, created in the early 20th century, is a classic American dish often enjoyed as a sweet treat or snack. This nostalgic sandwich is made by spreading peanut butter and marshmallow fluff on white bread. The dish typically uses soft white bread, which complements the creamy textures of the fillings. The brand of marshmallow spread traditionally used is Marshmallow Fluff, invented in 1917 by Archibald Query in Somerville, Massachusetts. It was originally sold door-to-door before gaining widespread popularity. The sandwich became a popular childhood treat in the mid-20th century because of its sweet and satisfying taste. The term Fluffernutter was coined by an advertising agency in the 1960s, solidifying the sandwich's identity. Sausage balls are actually something that you can vibe with a lot easier. It's also yet another thing that we got as a result of the war and how it handled food throughout the nation. I don't think the government ever saw this kind of culinary innovation coming when they decided to go all in on rationing things and making canned food popular, but you never know what goes on in the mind of a good chef. Kind of a testament to human creativity, right? You don't have to give all the credit to them, though. General Mills also helped out a lot here. They're the ones that made Bisquick, which was this 1931 mix of baking powder, shortening, and flour. It helped in a lot of dishes, but for sausage balls, it was a key player. Though it's not the shape you're used to seeing them in, it's still the same old friend that's gotten you through several awful evening shifts and long dreaded days at university. Anyone knows that the place of sausages in American culture, whether we're talking about getting a hot dog off a street stall or prepping a proper dog on the grill at home, it's something that a lot of citizens just consider a thing you know and do. Sausage balls were a way to keep the momentum for sausages going, as everything could use variation once in a while. You take biscuit, which gives a ready-made mix and gives a solid base for the sausage balls, and cheese, which holds the shape together and gives it that comfort factor. Along the same time as McDonald's and Burger King was making breakfast items, you had Wendy's trying to get into the game early with their breakfast burrito, which really did do much better than they initially expected it would. People knew Wendy's for their chicken and their amazing square beef hamburger patties, so it is not surprising that some people went in with hesitant minds when they first ordered this. We always say you cannot know until you try, and that could not have been truer for Americans when they would start taking their first bites of a succulent, explosive breakfast burrito. It had a perfect mix of flavors and harmony between meat, vegetables, sauces, and bread, all in some very affordable. Wendy's use of cheddar cheese also really got people going and sold them on the idea Americans will eat almost anything if you put some hot melted cheese on it. The success of Wendy's newly propelled breakfast menu, including the burrito, slowed down around 2013, so it's pretty disappointing that you cannot get that same luxury yet incredibly cheap breakfast. Spam rose to prominence during World War II, appreciated for its convenience and shelf life, and it continued to be a staple in American households thereafter. It was marketed as a versatile ingredient suitable for a variety of dishes, appealing to families looking for quick, budget-friendly meal options. Hormel Foods, the maker of Spam, responded to changing culinary preferences by introducing new flavors and varieties, aiming to reinvigorate the brand's appeal amid shifting consumer tastes that favored fresher, less processed food options. These efforts included targeted marketing campaigns that emphasized Spam's versatility in modern home cooking, showcasing its ability to adapt to current trends while maintaining its core identity as a convenient and reliable food product. Blueberry buckle is a delightful breakfast pastry that originated in the early 20th century. The term buckle originated in the 19th century to describe fruit-studded cakes that buckled under the weight of their toppings during baking. This dish, typically enjoyed as a breakfast or brunch item, combines a moist cake base with fresh blueberries and a crumbly streusel topping. The ingredients for blueberry buckle include flour, sugar, butter, eggs, and fresh blueberries, creating a sweet and satisfying treat. Blueberry buckle became popular when it was embraced as a traditional breakfast pastry in the northeastern United States, where blueberries are plentiful. In Maine, blueberry buckle is celebrated with an annual festival featuring baking competitions, tastings, and live music, highlighting the state's rich blueberry heritage. Here's a dish that's actually something that'll get you feeling all warm and fuzzy. After all, what else does a good chiffon cake do? And there's no better one than coconut chiffon cakes. These started becoming popular in the late 1920s, and the earliest reference I could find was of Harry Baker, who kept a secret recipe for 20 years before it finally became public in the 1940s. Before he decided to share his secrets with the wider world, most cakes were pretty heavy and required a lot of batter. That wasn't really to the liking of the upper class, especially when we talk about Hollywood stars who Henry was known to work for. They preferred foreign styles of making cakes, and especially in Europe, chiffon cakes were really popular. Henry got a solid grip on the dish because he prepared so many of them for their special events, and eventually, he developed a perfect recipe that even General Mills had their eye on. When they did get it, they started promoting it in their Betty Crocker recipes, which was a surefire way to bring the cake into the mainstream. That's some real commitment to the bit. But his recipe was sought after because even despite how chiffon cake is naturally a pretty light and airy cake, his was like a floating cloud with the best parts of coconut milk and extract. Also, the shredded coconut on top and the cream of tartar really gave it that finishing touch. The McDonald's steak, egg, and cheese bagel came out around the same time as its big breakfast and was often something families ordered together when they ate out. The incredible mix of egg and cheese with really flavorful steak bits into a bagel was something people in the States could not get enough of. It was especially popular with the older crowd, which is funny because the company initially thought it would be more popular with the younger crowd. Back then, you could get this bagel for $1.25, which was a reasonable steal and a perfect add-on at the time. Breakfast menus around the nation had a hard time competing with the steak, egg, and cheese bagel. And despite it being discontinued, it is an 80s icon we really want back. Creamed eggs on toast involves gently chopped hard-boiled eggs in a creamy sauce, often seasoned with herbs and spices, served over toasted bread. This dish, known for its comforting qualities and simple preparation, became a favored breakfast and light meal option, aligning with American preferences for hearty, straightforward dishes. The versatility in seasoning allowed for a variety of flavors, making it a popular choice in both diners and home kitchens. The dish's rich, creamy texture combined with the ease of preparation made it a reliable choice for a satisfying meal, fitting well into the meal routines of many seeking both comfort and simplicity in their culinary choices. Waffles with chicken is a classic Southern dish that beautifully combines savory and sweet flavors, first appearing in the 1930s. This dish pairs crispy fried chicken with fluffy waffles. The ingredients include chicken, flour, eggs, and buttermilk for the waffles, while the chicken is coated in seasoned flour before frying to golden perfection. The waffle batter is cooked in a waffle iron, resulting in a tender texture. Maple syrup is usually paired with this dish, enhancing the flavor combo. Roscoe's House of Chicken and Waffles helped popularize it, introducing this delicacy to a wider audience and solidifying its place in American food history. This iconic restaurant chain was established in Los Angeles in 1975 and quickly became famous for this unique dish. So your idea of a salad is probably a lot of greens, some vinegar, a bit of French dressing here and there. You know, things still within the bounds of sanity, of rationality. I mean, salads are supposed to be the poster boys for healthy eating, aren't they? So, what do you and I make of a strawberry pretzel Jell-O salad? Let's take a look at this dish. It's definitely a big part of what you would call retro American culture, and it was very common during wintertime holidays and potlucks. It's really important that you let each layer of this rest and set properly because it's not just an assortment of veggies you can toss in and mix. The pretzel crust, the cream cheese, the Jell-O layer, and the base all need to be set properly before the next one's added and chilled. It sounds like a lot of work, but I promise you, it really is an experience. I guess the saddest part about this dish is that it's completely a forgotten memory in the history of American cookbooks now. There was time in the middle of the 1900s that was really characterized by one thing and one thing only: creativity. You might be surprised to hear a salad like this exists, but back then people were making all kinds of colorful layered dishes that had explosive flavor profiles and would never shy away from the flavors their ingredients presented. Healthier versions of this salad used things like sugar-free Jell-O, but it was never really a dish that was healthy to begin with. It was one of the best things to throw at a birthday party or for a cookout when you needed a break from the pork and the beef. Next up, we have something that you would think people would want to have during a movie or their favorite show, but worked great as breakfast too. Burger King's French toast sticks first came around in 1985 in competition with Wendy's, who was also launching their own stick campaign in hopes of claiming a place in America's fast food Hall of Fame. And hey, they did, but the Burger King ones just had something saucy in them, something that gave you a jolt of energy for your regular sucky Monday morning shift or lecture. Some other places did try to make these toast sticks like Jack in the Box and Sonic, and some of those were pretty big players like McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts. They did not have as big of a piece of the pie as Burger King, though. What particularly helped these sticks keep their momentum is how well they paired with other items on the menu, and even some of the others on this list later on. Of course, they were great a la carte as well, but who really goes to fast food joints and walks out without combo meals, especially in those old 90s days? Still, those eras are definitely far behind us now, as the time of the French toast stick is long gone by today. curious how Jiffy Pop pancakes made morning meals a breeze with their just add water mix during the hectic 70s. This convenience resonated deeply with the 1970s households, streamlining the morning routine remarkably. The product's simplicity allowed anyone to quickly whip up pancakes, making it a popular choice among families with busy schedules. Jiffy Pop's marketing cleverly focused on these time-saving aspects, often showcasing family breakfasts that were both delicious and hassle-free. The mix was versatile, catering to various taste preferences with different flavors. While Jiffy Pop pancakes enjoyed popularity due to their convenience and taste, the evolving breakfast market eventually led to reduced visibility and presence, as newer breakfast options continued to diversify. Scrapple, a traditional Pennsylvania Dutch dish, dates back to the 17th century. It's a savory breakfast item made from pork scraps and cornmeal, formed into a loaf and fried. The dish uses specific animal parts like pork liver, heart, and trimmings, combined with cornmeal and spices, creating a unique flavor profile. Scrapple is usually fried and garnished with maple syrup or ketchup, making it versatile. Scrapple is considered one of the earliest forms of American comfort food, as it was created by German immigrants who settled in Pennsylvania. It's popular for its rich flavor and association with Pennsylvania Dutch culture. It became a regional specialty due to its resourcefulness and distinctive taste. Scrapple holds cultural significance as a testament to frugality and tradition, often served with eggs or toast. Speaking of comfort food that doesn't ever really get old, let's talk about Big Mama's egg pie. Funny name, right? A lot of people think the title came from the rural South. There, the mom of the family was often always in charge of deciding how the family would eat, a lot more so than other communities. They became known affectionately as Big Mamas, and it was a pretty cute honorific for Southern Black families. That's how they'd refer to the grandma or the eldest woman in the family who would cook all the delicious things you guys grew up on, like this pie here. When the Great Migration happened and those communities first flocked to America, they brought over a slew of family-friendly recipes with them, this egg custard pie being one of them. I didn't really get it either until I found out the history behind egg pie and how it's a staple of Southern homes. Basically, if you live up there, you've been around the block with this pie a few times. The custard eggs really need to be whisked properly to get it right though, but that's something grandmas, or as this dish would refer to them, Big Mamas were pretty well acquainted with. The best thing about custard pies was probably how easy it was to make them, which is also how they ended up getting so popular in the first palace. The ingredients were something you'd find around anywhere, really. You don't get a gray hair cooking food for a family on a yearly basis and come out of it with no tricks with basic things. McDonald's is a name anyone can recognize and still holds up today just as much as before, but do you remember when they were serving the iconic big breakfast at stores? McDonald's best and most iconic starter was probably their big breakfast, which literally everybody can remember having. This dish was truly a star on the 70s and 80s menus way before anybody ever even thought of a McMuffin. Mostly popular amongst teenagers working part-time, and McDonald's staff would enjoy a big breakfast on early work days. It was not just them, trust us. 8-year-olds to 35-year-olds all enjoyed getting soft, delicious scrambled eggs served with the fluffiest muffins you could get under $1. Sounds like a pretty good deal, right? No wonder it performed as well as it did, even if it got discontinued in 2002 in favor of hot dogs and burgers. Introduced in 1964 by Carnation, this wasn't just your average breakfast, it was breakfast on the go. Available in tasty flavors like chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry, chocolate being the preferred choice, it promised the nutrition of a complete meal. The drink became a morning staple due to its convenience and nutritional content, highlighted in campaigns that emphasized its health benefits. Over the years, as consumer tastes evolved, Carnation adapted its formula to include lower sugar and higher protein versions, meeting the newer nutritional expectations without compromising on the quick, delicious start that families had come to rely on. Buttered grits, a Southern staple, originated in colonial America. This simple yet beloved dish is usually served as a side or base for other toppings. Made from ground corn, grits are cooked with water or milk until creamy. Then butter is added for richness. The dish is synonymous with Southern cuisine, particularly in Charleston, South Carolina, known for its love of grits. Grits are remembered for their comforting texture and versatility, which made them a popular breakfast dish in the 1970s. Traditional or unusual toppings like cheese, shrimp, or gravy enhance the dish. The dish's cultural significance lies in its association with Southern hospitality and hearty breakfasts. In some Southern states, grits are even considered a delicacy and are often served at special occasions and celebrations. If we move on over to the South for a bit, we're going to find that these people dearly love their potato salads. Who can blame them? Region to region, there's no family that doesn't have a deep, intimate relationship with the potato. Arguably one of the finest things to ever come out of Mother Nature, and especially when you make a shout hallelujah potato salad. Before you ask in the comments, I'm just as lost as you on where they came up with the name. I mean, maybe they were Jeff Buckley fans? Side note, I really hope you get the reefer either way. This salad really did want to make you yell hallelujah, so there is that. It just isn't very often that you come across a salad that has it all, you know? The taste, the binge-eating potential, the perfect texture, and the health benefits. This one takes hard-boiled eggs, scallions, paprika, mayo, and potatoes, and a pretty tangy dressing. This is one of those dishes that German immigrants first brought over with them, and I'm personally glad they brought the best of their kitchens. All in all, if you're trying to find a new way to have a delicious salad, this is definitely the best thing on the market. It'll get you feeling fuller and healthier, and it's a lot better than a greasy street-side sandwich which your doctor may be recommending you to eat a lot less of. Something that was as essential to the hearty sandwich experience in the 80s as the meat itself, the cinnamon raisin biscuits that they first released back then, are also something people have constantly expressed their desire to see again. Seriously, it was impossible to not order this with whatever you were having. It was only some cents, and it elevated the meal to something else entirely. Think about how your Subway just does not feel complete without a chocolate cookie to go with it, except it is that feeling by 10 times. Cinnamon raisin biscuits were delectable, refreshing, and a light enough breakfast to be fulfilling without making you lazy. Unfortunately, for some odd reason unknown to all of us, despite its very warm place in the hearts of the fans, they took it off the menu in 2002. Chipped beef on toast, affectionately known as SOS, is a dish rooted in military history, featuring dried beef in a creamy sauce over toast. Simple and cost-effective, it became a staple in U.S. military mess halls for its quick assembly and satisfying nature. This dish's straightforward preparation, combining a roux-based sauce with rehydrated beef slices, made it a popular choice in civilian kitchens, especially among families with military backgrounds. Variations included substituting dried beef with ground beef or sausage, and biscuits instead of toast, catering to different tastes. The dish was valued for its hearty quality and versatility, fitting well into the culinary routines of many American households due to its ease of preparation and comforting nature. Pancake on a stick, a fun and convenient breakfast treat, was first created in the early 21st century. This dish combines the classic flavors of pancakes and sausage into an easy-to-eat form, typically enjoyed as a quick breakfast or snack. The dish consists of a sausage link coated in pancake batter and then fried until golden. Pancake on a stick became popular when it was introduced as a convenient food option by companies like Jimmy Dean. Unusual variations, such as using different types of sausage or adding cheese, have added to the appeal of this dish. In 2017, Pancake on a stick was featured on the menu of select fast food chains, further popularizing this innovative breakfast option. The dish has since become a favorite at state fairs and festivals across the United States. Whether you call it Holly Dolly bars or 7 layers, everyone has a fond memory of the biscuits we will talk about now. Hello Dolly bars were one of the nicest treats made by graham cracker crumbs, chocolate chips, sweetened condensed milk, and some of the freshest butterscotch chips you can imagine. This is a pretty vintage recipe. It goes back all the way to the 1960s. They gained a lot of attention as a bake sale treat that kids would peddle for a modest price. It's kind of like a good mix between a biscuit and a yeast roll, but its real charm is in how soft it is. The rise on these biscuits thanks to the yeast and the baking powder is something you can't match with any other biscuit on the market. That wraps up our list of long-lost brunch recipes. Comment down below which one you think should be brought back, and don't forget to like and subscribe.